Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. If you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is definitely the place to be. But before we get started, I do like to go over some new announcements and discoveries that I just found out about over the past week, and most of these are updates to games that I have mentioned in the past, but we do have some updated information and some dates for when these games are going to launch. And the first one is for Terraforming Mars, and this one's actually going to be launching at the end of the month. And to be a little bit more specific, this is going to be the dice version of the game. So if you're a fan of Terraforming Mars or Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition, this one's going to put a little bit different of a spin on it because this one is a dice game, and I expect it's going to be a little bit more simple than Terraforming Mars the original game, but it'll still maintain the core aspects of the game, just deliver it in a little bit different of a way. And just to be clear, I couldn't find any official announcement of this, and I also couldn't find the campaign pre-launch page, but I did see over on Board Game Geek that they updated the entry on the pre-launched games thread. So if this happens to be incorrect, just make sure that you're blaming them and not me. And we do now have a launch date for Maple Valley, which is the next game coming from Kids Table Board Games. And the reason that I'm mentioning this one is that this is a publisher that has a really positive reputation and creates some really high quality games that a lot of people like. And you've probably played some of their games in the past because they've created games like Creature Comforts and Wreck Raiders, which are a couple of my favorites, but they do have a lot of other games that they've published as well. So if you are a fan of those games, I think you'll definitely want to check this one out. And I do expect that this one will be about the same light to medium weight as the other games that they've previously released. And the date for this one is November 15th. And finally, we do have quite a big update to the Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era, and this is the game being launched by Chip Theory Games, and they've gone ahead and put together their GameFound page, and also they've announced a rough announcement date for the game. I think most of us are familiar with the Elder Scrolls series, which is a series of video games, but this one is set to launch in 2023, and the mechanisms in this game will be inspired by Chip Theory's most popular game, which is Too Many Bones. Too Many Bones seems to be a game that the people who like it absolutely love it, and then there is another group of people that like it but think that there's just a little bit too much overhead and a little bit too much content. But if I were to make a wager, I would say that this iteration is going to be a little bit more simplified, or at least a little bit more streamlined compared to the original game. So if you found that one a little bit overwhelming, this might be one to look into. But of course, this is all speculation, and I have no idea how complex this one will be relative to Too Many Bones. And that's all I have for new announcements, so let's check out the Kickstarters. And the first campaign we have launches on September 19th, and this one's called Kingdom Come Deliverance. This plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 90 to 150 minutes to play. And this is a cooperative campaign game where players are going to be making decisions that affect the future. And this is a campaign that I thought was launching last week, but it got pushed back to this week. So I've already provided all the details in my previous video, so I'll just go ahead and roll that footage for you now. And in this game, players are going to be working cooperatively to progress through a narrative campaign. They're going to be playing as different heroes, each with their own individual stats and abilities. And this game does take place in history during the Hussite Wars, which was part of the European religious wars and the Crusades. The game does have a few different paths to victory, so it's going to be up to the players to decide what steps they want to take forward and what they want to define as a success as the game's narrative evolves. But along the way, you'll find all sorts of events and characters to interact with and side quests to explore. And because there's so many different branches to the narrative, this game does use a companion app, and that's going to keep track of the different decisions that the players make, as well as their outcome and the different events that will happen in the future based on what the players have done so far. And each player is going to have 3 actions to spend on their turn, and you can use those actions to do different things like move around onto the different tiles on the board, interact with the board in different ways, or help the other players. And when you're interacting with the board, you're going to have all sorts of tokens, characters, enemies, guards, and points of interest to interact with. And each of these will require a skill check in order to determine your success. And the different stats that the players have will be able to help with those skill checks. So depending on the makeup of your character, or if another player is able to help you, that can really change the outcome of the different decisions. So you'll really want to take that into consideration for the events that you really don't want to fail. And it's these different interactions that will really open up the board and allow players to explore, because it'll allow you to enter buildings, lay out new tiles in new areas of the map, or even cover existing tiles depending on the results and if something's changed in that area. And the players will really want to be careful anytime that they're in the vicinity of a guard, because the guards are trying to get in your way, and you're going to be raising your suspicion depending on the actions that you do. But luckily, at the end of each turn, there is a refresh phase where your suspicion will cool down and your stamina will be refreshed along with your 3 actions. And if this one does sound interesting to you, definitely go ahead and check out the campaign and sign up to get notified, because it will get you a free extra character added to your pledge. And one other thing I wanted to point out is that this game is fully narrated by professional actors, and I did listen to some of it. It sounded really solid. So if you're not so much into reading a narrative, but you do enjoy hearing it, that is always an option. And of course, you can find links to this campaign in the description below if you want to know more. And launching on September 19th, we have Age of Comics: The Golden Years. This plays 1 to 4 players. It takes about 50 to 120 minutes to play. And this is a game where players are publishers of comic books during the golden years of the 30s and 50s. And this is a worker placement game. And the way that this game works is that players are going to be putting their workers out onto the board to do different things like hire artists and writers, publish their works, and try to gain the most fans, make the most money, and create the best portfolio of comic books. And there's 3 different ways that players can increase their fan base. The first is by being the first to publish in a specific genre. The second is by publishing comic books with staff that are specialized in the genre of the comic book that you're publishing. And the third is by completing special orders out on the map. And the game plays over 6 rounds, where players are going to be taking turns putting their workers out on the map in order to perform their actions. And there's 6 different action spaces that players can choose. And players can also upgrade these action spaces for themselves so that they get a little bit of a bonus when they use it in the future. And this is going to allow players to do different things like hire artists, writers, and gain new ideas. And you're going to be gaining these in the form of cards. And you're going to be trying to match these up in such a way so that your idea matches the genre and the skill set of your artist and writer. There's also a section of the board that represents the streets of New York, and there's going to be different pop-up stands and comic book stores out on this board that you'll be able to interact with, and you'll be able to perform an action in order to move your sales staff around on this board. And each of these stands and stores will have a certain preference that they're looking for in terms of the genre of comic books that they're selling, and you'll be able to sell your comic books to these stores, gain a bonus for matching up those genres. And whenever you publish one of your comic books, you're going to be putting it into your own personal player board and gaining cubes for publishing that book, which you'll then be able to put out onto the main board in order to upgrade your actions and give yourself a little bit of a bonus when you go to perform the action that you upgraded. And the game continues like this, and at the end of the 6th round, the player with the most fans wins the game. And launching on September 20th, we have Dungeon Brah, and this plays 2 to 4 players. It takes about 45 to 60 minutes to play, and this is a deck-building dungeon crawler card game that doesn't take itself too seriously. And in this game, players are going to be working mostly cooperatively as they explore a dungeon and fight monsters to gain loot and build your deck. And there's a few different types of cards that you'll find in this game. There's gear cards, which are used to battle, and then there's enchantment cards, which can change the rules of the game, hopefully in your favor. And one thing that you might want to know about this dungeon is that there is a very deadly feline dungeon boss guarding the loot of the dungeon, and this boss is known as Cthulhu. So for most of the game, you'll probably want to avoid getting into any confrontations with this final boss, but you are going to have to steal its treasure if you want to win the game, or you can choose the alternative way to win, which is to be the last player standing. I'll leave that up to you, and if you want to know more, you can check out the campaign, which is over on Kickstarter, and you can find a link to that in the description below. And launching on September 20th, we have Dungeon Universalis, and this plays 1 to 6 players and takes about 60 to 180 minutes to play. And this is a game that does have its own set of rules, and I guess most board games do, but this is also one that is super ambitious and provides a sandbox-style dungeon crawler that allows you to create almost any type of dungeon crawler that you like. And one thing to note about this game is that that description might sound a little bit vague, but this is also a game that has an 8.9 on BoardGameGeek, which is super impressive. And this isn't just people rating the game in anticipation of its release, because this game was actually released back in 2019. And the game offers a full campaign as well as one-shot scenarios for players to explore, and it does incorporate a lot of tabletop RPG elements and allows you to have that RPG experience, but without the need of a game master. And I know that's something that a lot of games have attempted with varying ranges of success, and I haven't played this game, so I can't speak to how it actually plays, but after looking into the rules and learning more about this game, I think this is one that's going to get a lot of things right. Players will each be able to create their own unique character with their own class and race, and there's going to be unique stats and abilities that are specific to your character, and they'll be able to help with different skill checks and challenges that you'll interact with in the game. The players will also be able to gain experience points in order to upgrade their characters further as the game progresses, and you'll be able to do different things like equip loot, armor, and weapons in order to augment your character even more, and even grant them new abilities that could change throughout a campaign. And in a nutshell, the way that this game plays is that players will be able to move around on a main map, and when you do that, you'll be able to visit different locations and then dive into those locations to visit things like different taverns and shops and interact with different characters, or run into different situations that players will have to deal with. And depending on the player's decisions, you might have to perform different skill checks that have different rewards or penalties depending on the results. But through these events and dialogue, there'll be all sorts of quests for players to discover, and whenever that happens, you're going to move over to the campaign booklet, and then you're going to pull up the page associated with that quest. And this is going to provide a little bit of a narrative, outline the scenario that players are engaging with. It's going to tell you your goal, your map setup, and the win and loss scenario, and also an estimate of how long it will take, so players can have a good idea of if they're able to fit it into their night. And players will be piecing together that scenario with the different maps and tokens that the scenario describes. And they're going to be working together to explore that dungeon or area that they've been thrown into in order to try and complete the win condition. And if you're an RPG enthusiast or a dungeon master yourself, you might already be recognizing how you can use these different components to create scenarios of your own. And that's exactly the type of stuff that this game intends to allow for. But the game continues like this as players jump back and forth between different scenarios and the main map as they explore the worlds and complete the main campaign. And if this is a game that interests you, you can check out the links in the description below. But since this is a game that's also already been released, you could also check out all sorts of reviews and playthroughs over on YouTube or on the BGG page under the videos tab. Also launching on September 20th, we have Bakufu, and this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 15 to 30 minutes to play. And in this game, each player is playing as a daimyo in charge of their own castle, and there's a couple ways to win the game. You can either choose war or you can choose peace. And the way this game works is that players are going to be trying to collect different types of cards throughout the game, but every player starts out with a castle card, and you're going to put that into your tableau, and you might be able to add certain cards to that as the game goes on. But there's 4 types of cards in the game. The first one is the building cards, and these can be used to add on to your castle cards, which can grant you different things like more defense, income, or additional strength. And then there's character cards, which grant players with a one-time use ability that can be used to either help yourself or hinder your opponents. And then there are enlightenment cards, and these don't really do anything, but they do grant you peace points, which is one of the ways to win the game. And then finally, there are the soldier cards, and this is the other way to win the game by fighting opponents in order to try and gain war points. And you're going to be using these to attack your opponents or defend yourself against attacking opponents. And each turn, players are going to be able to play either a soldier card or a character card. If they choose to play a soldier card, they're going to be attacking one of the other players, and then each of those players is going to be taking turns playing one soldier card at a time. And then they're going to compare the swords of the attacking player to the shields of the defending player. You can always decide to pass and not play a card so that you don't use up all your cards in a single battle. But if you won and you're the attacker, then you're going to gain a war point. But if you lost, then the opponent is going to get compensated with additional currency, and they're also going to steal one of the buildings from the attacker. And an interesting thing here is that all of the cards are going to get discarded except for the last one that the players played. So the order that you play your cards really does matter if you want to try and use your more powerful cards again and again in future battles. But whoever did lose the battle will also gain an immunity card, which can protect them from being attacked in some of the future turns. And of course, if players decide to play a character card instead of a soldier card, then you just play that ability, and then you're going to gain income and then buy as many cards as you're able to from the shared market. And the game continues like this, with players taking turns until a single player has either gained 3 war points or 3 peace points, and then at that point, that player wins the game. And if you're interested in this one, I have links in the description below. Also launching on the 20th, we have Fateforge Chronicles of Kaan, and this plays 1 to 4 players, and this is a cooperative RPG mythical action adventure where players are going to be playing as different heroes venturing out of their forested homeland to the crowded city out on an adventure. And the game starts players with the goal of heading into the city to free their emissary from the palace prison, but of course things will probably not go as planned, and the players are going to be thrown into some tough situations that will branch into so much more. And the way that the campaign's sectioned up is that it's broken into a bunch of smaller episodes that all play in about an hour or less, and the decisions made by the players as well as their successes and failures will have a ripple effect that impacts the scenarios played in the future. And in order to make all of this possible, the game does use an app in order to tell the story and the atmosphere, but also to remember and react to the players' choices. And this is a game that self-identifies as an action-adventure, so you can expect a lot of action and excitement in the way that this campaign plays out, and each scenario will throw you into situations where you'll need to work together to defeat or avoid enemies, and managing your health and energy will be a large concern because you don't heal after every battle, but you will be gaining new gear and skills to help you along the way. And of course, if you want to know more, I have links in the description below. And also launching on the 20th, we have Talking Hearts, and this is a game designed to encourage conversation and help two people get to know each other just a little bit better. And the way this game works is that it offers over 200 different types of cards, and these are all going to be grouped into different categories, allowing players to decide what type of conversation and questions that they want to develop. And this is all designed to be very lighthearted and introspective in order to help you get to know someone new. And for existing couples, this can offer a fun activity that can just bring you a little closer together. The players will be going back and forth, choosing different categories, and then asking associated questions within that category, and then just having fun and letting the conversation develop. The campaign will also be offering an After Dark expansion for those of you that are able to dive into those more personal questions and just get to know what each of you like in other areas of the relationship. All super important, so if you are interested in this one, you can check out the link in the description below. And also launching on September 20th, we have Fences the Ranch, and this is an expansion to the game The Fences, which plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 45 to 75 minutes to play. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a tile placement game where players are going to be taking turns putting a tile out on the main board, and each of the tiles will have fenced in areas with different types of livestock. And the goal of this game is to connect the tiles in such a way so that you're getting like animals in the same pasture, and then claiming those areas for yourself. And you can claim areas that aren't completely closed off, but you are taking the risk that some other player might try to mix in animals that don't belong in your pasture in order to try and reduce the amount of points that you're able to get. And this campaign is going to add 9 new expansion modules that you can mix into the game however you like. And this is going to give the players a lot more flexibility in the way that they play the game, and it's going to add a few different things like adding chicken pastures into the game, as well as a tile with a fox on it that you don't want to get mixed up into your chicken pastures. And it also includes horses and tractors, allows you to sell animals at a market, trying to time it just right so that you're selling them at the most optimal time. And it also adds gates that you can open and close in order to change the size of your fields. Of course, there'll be a lot more information on the campaign, so if you want to know more about each of these individual modules, you can check that out in the description below. Also launching on the 20th, we have Daybreak, and this is a cooperative engine builder about stopping climate change. And in this game, you're going to be building up new technologies, creating different social movements to try and decarbonize the world. And players will be playing as up to 4 different world powers, each with their own individual player boards that outline their electricity output and demand, their emissions, as well as the number of communities that they currently have in crisis, and their overall resilience, which kind of acts as an armor to reduce the amount of crises that you get into anytime that happens to happen. And something that I think is important to note about this game is that it is co-designed by Matt Leacock, which is the creator of one of the most popular games of all time, Pandemic, and a lot of the different iterations of Pandemic. This is a game that plays over a series of rounds, and at the start of each round, a crisis event card is going to get drawn, and that's going to affect you and all the players for that round. But then there's also going to be a project card that gets drawn, which is going to allow players to access new rules and abilities that they might be able to exploit to their advantage. And each player is going to start the game with 5 opportunity cards in their tableau, but then you're also going to be drawing more into your hand at the start of each round. And these cards are used in a few different ways. For the cards that are already out in your tableau, each of them will have an ability, and you can pay a cost to use that action. Alternatively, you can play a card on top of a card in your tableau to replace its ability with a new one, but you'll be playing them in such a way that the top of the previous card is still visible, because at the top of each card are different icons, and these can sometimes augment the abilities of the card that is at the top of the stack. So you'll be trying to match those things up as best as possible to get the most out of your abilities. And alternatively, instead of adding a card on top of your existing card, you can instead slide it behind your stack of cards so that you're just getting the icons added to your existing ability and not replacing the ability with a new one. And one thing to note here is that the cards also double as the currency, so if any of these cards or abilities have a cost, you're going to be paying for that cost with more cards. But in addition to all these individual player boards, there's also a main board that outlines the current state of the world, and there'll also be a main map of the world where players can encourage the health of the oceans and forests. And this is important because those things will help you process your carbon emissions, and any that can't be processed are considered excess emissions, and this excess will go onto a separate track that will increase throughout the game, raising the temperature of the world, which comes with its own negative effects by drawing an event tile out of the event bag, which usually ends up in some amount of crises happening. And if any player at any point ever ends up with 12 communities in crisis, then you lose the game. But players win the game if they're able to complete a round and they have no excess carbon. So the game will continue like this, with players playing action cards in order to augment the action cards that they already have out in play to try and do their best to mitigate whatever issues that they're having at that point in the game, and hopefully they can be successful and save the world. And if this one interests you, I have links in the description below. Also launching on the 20th, we have Moku Tower, the Endless Column, and this plays 2 to 6 players and takes about 20 to 30 minutes to play, and this is a standalone expansion to the game Moku Tower. But the way that this game plays is that each round there's going to be 3 active players with different roles. There's going to be 2 stackers and then 1 invader. And the way this works is that the stackers are going to draw a card, and then that card's going to dictate what type of tower they're trying to build for that round, and they're going to be racing to try and complete it first. The invader player is going to roll dice, and depending on the results that they get, that's going to allow them to interfere with the players in various ways. So this might mean that they could go ahead and flick one of the dice at one of the towers. Of course, that player will probably want to interfere with the player who's currently winning the game. So not only do you get to destroy something that someone so carefully put together, it also acts like a little bit of a catch-up mechanic. And the game just continues like this, alternating which 3 players are the active players, and then the first player to reach 20 points wins the game. And now launching on September 21st, we have Majesty of Dragons, and this plays 2 players and takes about 15 to 45 minutes to play, and this is a competitive dual card strategy game, and this is also a game that I thought was launching a few weeks back, so I already did offer coverage for this one, so I'll just go ahead and roll that footage for you now. And this is a card combat game that has 5 different ways that players can try to win, and players will be essentially recruiting different dragons onto their side, trying to achieve one of those objectives in order to defeat their opponent. And the first phase is the auction phase, and the way that this phase works is that there's going to be a river of dragons out on the table, and players will be able to bid on those dragons, but each dragon does have a minimum bid that must be met in order to recruit that dragon to your side, but any other player can try to outbid you. But you do want to be strategic with the way that you place your tokens, because you can actually bid on multiple dragons, and if everyone's spending all their tokens to try and outbid themselves on a single dragon, you might be able to get another one at a very affordable price. And then we move into the combat phase, where each player will get the chance to decide if they want to attack another player, but the catch here is that the defending player gets to decide which dragons get paired up in the battle. You'll then be checking their combat power, and the dragons with the lower combat power will be discarded. And then there's the progress phase, where if you have any tokens left over from the auction phase, you can spend those to buy different cards like progress cards or Dragon Lord cards. The progress cards will have a special objective that, if you're able to complete, can grant you some more tokens or special advantages. And the Dragon Lord cards work as an upgrade for your dragons, because they'll all have a special bonus, and you'll be able to assign that Dragon Lord to one of the dragons in your hand. And the 5 ways to win the game is to kill 5 dragons, control 5 of the Nemesis dragons, which are just a special dragon with an icon on them, or hold 30 tokens total, control dragons with a total value of 20, or be the player with the highest value set of dragons when all the dragon cards have run out. And the first player to meet any of those requirements wins the game. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week, but don't leave yet, because we do have an awesome giveaway to announce. And I know this one's awesome because it was our Discord pick of the week last week, and this one's called Age of Inventors. And in this game, players are competing to have the biggest impact on the world by creating useful inventions. And this is both a worker placement game and a tile placement game, because players will be performing different actions to recruit different inventors of different skills in order to bring different ideas to life. When players recruit an inventor, they'll be able to gain that inventor, and then they'll be able to perform an action later in the game in order to put that inventor somewhere out on the main board. That tile then becomes an action space itself that players can use to perform its ability, and you'll be marking that space with your colored token to indicate that it's yours. And if another player uses your space, then you get rewarded for that. Each inventor that players collect also comes with a card and a special ability that will be accessible to that player as the game moves forward. But players can also choose to gain invention tiles, which work a little bit different than the inventor tiles, but you'll still be putting them out on the main board, but you just have to put them beside an inventor that matches the color of that tile, because that inventor needs to have the skills in order to make that invention possible. Completing these can give you powerful effects and also move you up on different tracks that can help you win the game. And players will also be able to upgrade the action spaces on their own personal player board, giving them even better options. And this giveaway is going to be for a deluxe version of the game, which comes with the core game and all the deluxified bits and components. And to enter this giveaway, just leave a comment down below with the hashtag invention and let us know of some idea that you came up with that would work for a great invention. For myself, I spend too much time thinking about this stuff and I have a whole list of inventions. I mean, someone already stole my hot sauce keychain idea because that's already a thing. So I'll just pick one of my other ideas at random, and one that I always thought was cool would be a laundry detergent laundry bag, where you can just throw all of your laundry into the laundry bag, but then the bag itself dissolves into laundry soap so that you just throw the whole bag in your washing machine. I swear I'm not that lazy, I just like being efficient. But good luck in the giveaway. I'm excited to see all your different ideas. But for now, let's go ahead and draw the winner from last week's giveaway. And the giveaway we had for last week was for Legacy of You. And to draw a winner, I use this fancy application here. And all these extra names down here are bonus entries for my Patreon subscribers. If you like this sort of content and you want to help make all these efforts just a little bit more sustainable for me, I do have links to my Patreon in the description below, and I truly appreciate it. Let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw the winner. And the winner is GS24, and this is one of our Patreon subscribers, and I apologize for my crazy scrolling there. My scroll wheel just broke, so I have to use the scroll bar, which I'm discovering is a complete nightmare. Never take your scroll wheel for granted. But congratulations to our winner here. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a pledge for Legacy of You, which looks like an amazing game, and I'm super excited for you and a little bit jealous. And that's everything I have for you this week, but next week is already shaping up to be quite a lot of games. We'll see how many more games end up making their way in. It could be another monster week. We'll see how it goes, but I'm sure either way it'll be keeping me busy. So as always, thanks so much for tuning in. I truly appreciate it. And until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.
What?